Hi, Chris. Thanks very much for agreeing to do the interview. It's wonderful to catch up. I was just looking through my emails. You initially inquired back in May 2016. We're now, what do we know? We've just turned into April 2022. So it's great to catch up again. You've got some really exciting news and some examples of what the destination of recovery from pelvic pain can look like. I'm very excited about some of the things you're going to tell us here. And can you just start by giving a brief overview of yourself and some of the symptoms that you had? I know your symptoms began around 2012 and then 2014, a couple of separate cases of some symptoms then. So yeah, bring us up to speed.
Sure, yeah, happy to. And thank you, Carl. Real pleasure to be here. I guess, yeah, I had a few warning flags in 2012 and 2014. Where I had a really unexpected swelling in the testicular region, which at first blush I couldn't define what it was, and subsequent investigation suggested that it was a periodic inflammation. Epididymitis was the clinical diagnosis of it. That it was acute, not chronic. And that, yeah, with some antibiotics and some anti-inflammatories, it would go away. And it was usually as a result of possibly physical trauma to that area, or the GPs tended to shrug and just went, it happens. Could be an infection of some sort. Just take care and take these, and you'll be fine. And pleasingly, both the infections cleared up. After the intervention. I didn't really think too much of it subsequently, but of course, looking back with hindsight, you realise what could have contributed to it, and therefore, actually, those were some red flags as to what was going to come later.
Thank you so much. So that was 2012 and 2014, and then something else happened. Another event of symptoms happened.
Yeah, so I had an accident, fell off my bike, and I didn't realise it at the time, but thanks to your interventions, we realised that I'd probably fractured my tailbone or broken it, one of the two. And, like a typical bloke, when I fell off, I was like, oh, bloody hell, that's sore. What to do about it? And didn't go and see my doctor, just carried on. So carried on sitting in long meetings on hard chairs, carried on riding. I'm a keen cyclist. So yeah, that wasn't really the best thing you could do for something like that. And that happened I think it was around July time, in 2015. And by the end of August, I'd suffered a full-blown case of what was then diagnosed as prostatitis. And I didn't realise what was contributing to it. Suffice to say, it was incredibly uncomfortable, and you go through the usual flowchart for diagnosis of it. Your medical history, what do you do? At the time, I have been all my life an endurance athlete, so doing long distance running, swimming, and certainly over the last 10 years, more cycling, as I found that running was pretty hard on my joints. So people say, well, look, you exercise regularly, you have a good diet. I eat mainly a plant-strong diet, so there's nothing there that would give us any overdue cause for concern. But my urologist was adamant. He said, look, cycling is absolutely the wrong thing for you. If you're suffering from prostatitis, this is definitely a no-go. You need to give up completely until this is cleared up, which is. It's difficult news to take, I think, any time of the year, but it was particularly difficult then. And unfortunately, the condition didn't clear up with antibiotics, as had been the case in previous years when I'd had the infection in my testicle. And as a result, it just seemed to get worse, and certain things influenced it positively or negatively. So I found that when I drank caffeine, particularly coffee, that had a big impact on how I felt. Spicy food would set the condition off as well. If I was particularly animated about something, maybe having a stressful day, I'd find that I'd get this strange pain in my pelvic region, which, when I was asked to describe it, all I could describe was some days it's like a dull ache, and some days it feels like it's on fire, it's prickly. And sometimes that's provocated by spicy food and caffeine. That's more the sort of fiery feeling. And then other days it's just a really sore ache. Excuse me 1 second, Carl. I'm going to close my blind because the sun is very nice, but it's now coming through, shining on the screen. Hopefully that's better. So I spent some time with my urologist looking at a range of interventions. He gave me a physical examination, prescribed some very, very powerful antibiotics, which I was on for a month, which were awful. I mean, they made you feel really, really, really awful. At the end of that, I tentatively made some steps back to doing some of the more physical stuff that I enjoyed, but immediately found that whether it was cycling or running, a lot of the symptoms came back quite quickly. And when I asked him for a second opinion, he said, look, I can't help you. You need an anaesthetist. So you're on to pain management. So I spent some time with an anaesthetist who said, well, the first thing we recommend are antidepressants. I said, but hang on, I'm not depressed. He said, no, it's just to address the underlying pain. And I said, well, okay. I said, how long do I have to be on these? And she said, well, wait and see. We'll trial you for a month and come back and see me, and we'll see how we get on. And again, being on them was not pleasant at all. I'm usually a pretty energetic person. Yes, they help me sleep, but during the day I felt slightly comatose and just not my usual self. And I was convinced that these weren't addressing the root cause; they were just addressing the symptoms. And I was just keen to get to what the underlying cause was. After about a month, I went back, had a conversation with the anaesthetist, who said, look, there are other interventions, certainly more invasive interventions that we can make to get you more comfortable. And she proposed an injection into my spine to try and address the nerves that run down from the spine into the pelvic region. She'd helped an individual who was suffering similar symptoms in the same way, and felt confident that this could alleviate my symptoms. And look, to be fair, this was probably February, March time of 2016. So I've been dealing with this since August. And as all of your clients and patients will know, this impacts you every day, and it's really hard to get away from it. So by that stage, I was like, well, I'm 7 months into this now. I really need some help. So yeah, I'll roll the dice and I'll try this. So off to hospital, and a guided injection into my spine, which after a few days of agonizing back pain, because someone sticking a needle in your spine can do that. It was, the symptoms did start to calm down, which was great. And I thought, okay, I'm potentially on a path here. So again, tentative steps back to normal life, trying to start to enjoy the things that that I'd been missing out on for so long. And again, within a few weeks of not doing too much, all of the symptoms were back again. And that really led me to question, A, the interventions that I'd had so far, but then secondly, there must be an alternative answer out there. And the more I searched, the more information I found. That famous book, A Headache in the Pelvis. I remember reading some of that and thinking, crikey, is this me? But what was interesting was there was definitely a psychological element to it that was coming through. Some of the patients who recounted their stories talked about feeling stressed, and that feeling of stress, being a contributor to it. I spent some time with a physiotherapist and a bike fitter who gave me some really good guidance on how I could get more comfortable on the bike. But having tried 3 different saddles and lots of different exercises, it still didn't make that much of a difference. But then 2 things happened. Firstly, by chance, I was tying my shoelaces on the stairs when I was going out to work one day, and found myself in a position where I was actually stretching part of the muscles around the pelvic region, and I suddenly felt a small burst of relief, and I thought, well, that's interesting. That felt quite nice, and I made a note to come home and try and stretch those muscles a bit more. But then, most importantly, Carl, I came across your website, which was the oasis I've been looking for, and suddenly there was first-hand evidence that, one, I wasn't alone in this journey, but there was a practitioner out there who not only had suffered some of the symptoms himself, but was dedicated to treating men with my condition. And that's what led me to you. And I'd love to say that it was a targeted intervention from a really thoughtful chain of health specialists, but I've actually got Google to thank for it, and in your promotional materials. But I guess for me there were three things that resonated at the time. One, a connection with the psychological components of the condition, which I hadn't appreciated before. Secondly, the idea that actually stretching some of my muscles might help alleviate some of these symptoms. And then thirdly, that actually this was a known issue. It wasn't just something that's in my head, and that there's a practitioner there who was willing to help. And I guess if I think back to our first interaction, it was wonderfully calming and reaffirming and validating. I remember entering your room and talking about what had happened, and you projected this wonderful warmth and calmness that I'd not come across before, which was just hugely reassuring. As I'm sure all of us can relate to, when you go and see busy healthcare practitioners, they're on a timetable, as we all are in life, but it's always quite a pacey engagement. They're looking at the notes. Yes, you next. Okay, right. Tell me what's happened. But you were a lot more thoughtful and a lot more considered in your response, in your evaluation, in your questioning, because you understood the condition, and you had created, I think, a place of place of safety for people to talk about this. We get it. Men don't like to talk about these sorts of things. It's sometimes even harder to talk to other men about them. Crikey, and that was hugely helpful.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Chris. Can I go back and just reflect on a couple of things, if that's okay, and just mention them as really important notes? And thank you for your kind words there as well. That's something I try and portray. It's something I try and give across. So it's nice to know that it's actually received as such as well.
Absolutely.
You've mentioned, so I guess we're going to touch just briefly on the treatments, and then I'd like to just refresh on some of your symptoms and just get some clarity there. So there's the AAA approach, which is often used, which is antibiotics, alpha blockers, and anti-inflammatories. And there is a fourth A that's now being used much, much more often, and it is antidepressants in terms of the treatment and management of symptoms as well. I'm sure if you're watching this and you are on your journey at the moment, you may well recognize things like amitriptyline or nortriptyline. There might be a gabapentin, other medication that's in there as well that's used alongside. So gabapentin, pregabalin, ciprofloxacin, a variety of anti-inflammatories as well. Often depends on the specialist that you're seeing. Chris, you mentioned to us in the early doors, 2012 and 2014, you were diagnosed with epididymitis. And then when you had the bike accident, you were getting the variety of symptoms that would range from something fairly low and non-invasive to really burning symptoms in and around the pelvis. Can you tell us where those symptoms were present and how they were presenting to you? If there was change to any function or just comfort levels, sitting, etc.
Sure. Yeah, of course. So I guess if I reflect on the epididymitis, it was very pronounced in the left-hand testicle, very sore, very swollen, uncomfortable to walk, but as I say, alleviated within a few days of antibiotics and anti-inflammatories. When it came to what was diagnosed as non-bacterial prostatitis in 2015, I guess the symptoms presented themselves in a range. So uncomfortable to pass water, that was definitely one of the sensations. An increasing frequency of passing water, but periodically difficult to pass water and very painful. A burning sensation when I passed water. Similarly, sex drive went south. Just not something that was on the radar at all. When it was actually quite painful. When I ejaculated, there's a burning sensation when that happened as well, which made it equally unpleasant, and of course not something that you want to rush into anytime soon. And you've got to explain that to your partner, and it's very hard for them to understand. I was very fortunate; my wife was incredibly sympathetic, but I appreciate for a lot of men it's difficult. It's a dent to your ego. It can often be another wrinkle in a relationship which you definitely don't need. But yeah, it's uncomfortable. Day to day, I find it very difficult to sit in long meetings, and funnily enough, most of us who work in most jobs have to sit on chairs for a long period of time, and that was definitely uncomfortable. Part of my role at the time included attending conferences, entertaining clients, which would mean long evenings, sitting down, and yeah, that could be excruciating at times. And I put that down to, I think, having a fractured tailbone which didn't heal properly, and the referred pain that then radiated around the pelvic region. But of course, in hindsight, what was it doing? It was causing me pain. I was becoming tense, and all of the muscles in my pelvis were just doing this. They were locking up and doing what muscles do best. They protect the area that's been damaged and saying, hey, we're not going to unclench until this is fixed. And as anybody will know, you can't fix a tailbone if it's broken. You've just got to sit really carefully and not aggravate it and hope that it heals. But of course, that vicious circle of and we can come on to nutrition in a moment, because I do think that plays a key role. A combination of busy professional life, concern and anxiety over what was happening down there, together with the physical pain that was being generated by the injury itself, just became this sort of melting pot of discomfort. And unfortunately, it's self-reinforcing until you understand what's actually happening down there, and you can pick it apart with some help. You can then start to address some of the root causes and how to alleviate them.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your honesty and openness there, Chris, in sharing what you were going through. I'm sure many men out there will recognize the same set of symptoms that you have and the same impact that would have had over their lives as it did yours. So you reached out to me in kind of late springtime, early summertime of 2016, and we started to put together a bespoke care plan for yourself, listen to your symptoms, how much that was impacting you, what you've been told to avoid, some triggers, and you'd mentioned caffeine and spicy food there for you. And tell me from your point of view what that looked like to you as a patient coming in and receiving that bespoke care plan.
Super helpful, because again, for the uninitiated, this is a complete jungle. There's so much misinformation out there. I would encourage people, I know there's a temptation to Google it passionately, and there's a temptation to spend time on forums with other people. My advice is try not to, because there's a lot of disinformation out there, and talk to experienced practitioners would be my counsel, but also know and understand your triggers and your body. So I think having the benefit of somebody who's worked with a number of patients with a similar condition or the same condition, helping me understand some of the drivers that could be aggravating my condition, and mapping those out into I guess a list of not don'ts and do's, but really just things to be aware of, be mindful of, what can cause a flare up, and what can help you avoid a flare up. That was really helpful. And then I guess it's that sort of test and learn. So knowing where your boundaries are, not jumping straight back into an activity or a hobby at 100%, but bringing yourself back to it gradually. And I guess there was another thing that had to happen at the same time. My body had to heal, so the underlying breakage had to heal, and over time that did start to heal. And as a result, I think some of the tension did disperse. But it was only with that intervention, with that care plan, and with the associated exercises that came with it and the guidance, that I was able to unlock it further and progress.
Fantastic, thank you. So there was some movements and some exercises in there. We looked at some nutrition and some triggers for you, some relaxation, and all of these approaches had to fit in with your lifestyle approach, your work, your family. You had 2 younger children at that particular point, responsibilities. There's a social life in there as well that I always encourage patients to go back to, but also mindful of cycling was always the one, and running, your endurance sports, they were kind of the things that we wanted to have as the destination, if you like. And we'll talk about the destination and what that looks like for you now. Were there any, you mentioned about the nutrition for yourself, Chris. Was there any turning point in the nutrition or the movements that you felt, propelled your recovery further forward?
Definitely. I mean, you recommended a great book, which I've still got, which is How to Heal Pelvic Pain, which was an excellent read, and reflects on some of those areas, which is incredibly helpful. I'd always eaten quite a plant-strong diet, but we deliberately moved to a much more plant-oriented diet, and I was really judicious about what I ate. So avoiding spicy food, even though I enjoy it. I was never a big drinker, but I haven't drunk spirits since, really, in any quantity at all. When I look back, the epididymitis was definitely triggered by some really good nights out, but too much poison in my system, quite simply. So overdoing it, rich food, alcohol, caffeine, not deliberately, but I would quite easily have 4, if not 5, cups of tea and coffee a day. I'd wake up, have a cup of tea in the morning, get to the office, have a coffee. I'd maybe have a working lunch. Someone would serve me a coffee after that. I'd have a tea at 4 o'clock, and then sometimes one after dinner if I was out late. And you don't add them up when you're doing it, but you just suddenly go, wow, that's actually a lot of caffeine for anybody to be having. And you throw some alcohol into the mix and some rich food, that's not healthy. So those were definitely some of the I remember the DIMS and SIMS that we talked about. Those were some of the danger signs, and some of the safety signs were, well, okay, how do you navigate to a better diet, less alcohol? And for me, dropping spirits was a no-brainer. I'm going to sound like one of those terrible born-again non-smokers, and to all of your viewers, I apologise if I get evangelical about it. I have never felt so good having dropped a lot of that toxic stuff from my diet, and I can assure you, I'm not on commission here, and I'm not an Instagrammer, or I'm not a YouTuber, but you just have to try it. It really can be incredibly powerful, and I stand by that today. I do enjoy having a beer with my friends occasionally, and I'll have a glass of wine, but that will be it. We went out with some friends on Friday, and I said to my other half, I said, look, it's one beer, and I'm going to have to force myself to have this, because I really don't want any more. So I had a couple of drinks during the week, and that was it. So I've seen what the damage can be when you overindulge, and it put me in a difficult place for a few years. So it wasn't a difficult decision to turn my back on it, let's put it that way.
And thank you for that. And again, your honesty and transparency there. And it's allowed you to be where you are at the moment as well. So tell us what recovery started to look like. We mentioned cycling, we mentioned running, we mentioned social activities there as well. How did that change then for you? What green lights did I give you? What permission slips?
Well, as always, a phased approach back to what I would suggest was normal routine, was how we agreed it should happen. And I remember one of the things you said to me that's always stuck with me, Carl, is recovery is never linear, and anybody who thinks that there's going to be this wonderful easy curve back to recovery, it's not going to happen. Or very rarely will happen. So we had peaks and troughs, and that was always helpful, because it kept me in check, just knowing how far I could go, what I could push my body to do. And I'll be really candid with you. There have definitely been relapses, and when I've looked back on them, I've gone, actually, I know what was happening there. Mm. So I was doing, there was a period in 2020, when I was 2020, when I was doing too much, overindulging a bit in terms of exercise, so pushing my body quite hard. I was doing some transatlantic travel, which is a bit exhausting. There was no small amount of socializing associated with that. All of the things that you've got to be mindful of. And guess what? I got back completely rinsed from a trip to the States, and felt some of the symptoms coming back. So immediately, what did I do? Took a long bath, nice warm bath, stretched, switched off my BlackBerry, had a really good night's sleep, had some really nutritious food, and that was really restorative. And just being really mindful of how I was feeling, and knowing where those danger marks lie. And to your point around permission slips, I took permission slip to just chill out for 24 hours, and that made a big difference. And it reminds me of one of the things you said early on in our engagement. You said, Chris, how do you relax? And I immediately said, oh well, Carl, I'll go for a run, I'll go for a bike ride, I'll play chess with my son. And you sort of sat back and you reflected on it for a moment. You said, those sound like things that you would enjoy, but not necessarily things that would relax you. And boy, were you right. Because sure, that's how I enjoyed spending some time. But this was me in sixth gear, and that's not relaxing. So it was me mistaking what was engaging and exciting and entertaining and fun for what was relaxing, and the two are very different.
Yeah, it's a real eye-opening moment often when I do say, okay, well, that's great, that's fantastic, that's expenditure, that's expenditure, and that's expenditure, that's output of energy. What are you doing to conserve it? And conservation, giving yourself permission to say, you know what, I am going to take a night off, I am going to read a book, I'm going to go to bed early, I'm going to run myself a hot bath, I'm going to be nice to myself. The kind of things I might suggest to someone else if they're maybe a bit run down as well.
Exactly right. No, I couldn't agree more. And do you know what, that really started to build into my daily routine, just that mindfulness that we talked about, and making sure that I was being, attentive to my body and my psychological needs, because if I'm not attentive to them, nobody else is going to be until things get really bad. And if I don't look after myself, then how can I look after other people? And maybe if I can share one more example of when I had a relapse, which was quite recently actually, but it was only very, very brief. But it was an interesting warning sign. I was asked at really short notice to travel to a big conference, probably 2,000 people, and present to this group of 2,000 people on a fairly involved topic that I certainly wasn't a subject matter expert on. But you take one for the team and you go, yeah, I'm going to go and do that. So a little bit galled by the prospect, as most people would be. But I did what I usually do. I prepared thoroughly and went on my way. As I was traversing London to get to the train station where I need to catch my train to go to the venue, I had my overnight bag, which is a small suitcase, wasn't particularly heavy, but contained what I needed for an overnight stay. And I was finding there were lots of stairs, and it's quite, it's quite awkward sometimes. You've got to move a bag around to get up and down stairs. And I was being lazy. I was literally just picking it up by its handle and heaving it upstairs. I wasn't being mindful as to how I carried it. And in the back of my mind, I was like, got to get my train, and I've got to prepare my speech on the train. I've got to check the details, and then get to the hotel, check in, find somewhere to eat. Got to speak to the kids, make sure they're okay, speak to my wife, and the usual process when you think about when you're going away for a night. Anyway, I got on the train. I was like, I really need the loo. I thought, hey, a minute, I've only just been to the loo like an hour ago. I was like, I can't wait. As in, I'm really going to have to go to the loo. This was burning desire to pee. So shut off the loo, and it was really painful. And I thought, yeah, okay, we've been here before. And it was at that point I thought, right, didn't realize it, but here are some red flags. So busy schedule, daunting conference, heavy bag, straining to lift it upstairs, and absolutely, yeah, and I think you mentioned this. You said, look, you can get pelvic pain lifting your shopping out of the car. Precisely that. So I stopped, relaxed, turned my laptop off. Went and got a drink from the buffet car. When I got to my hotel, checked in, took a couple of paracetamol, did some stretching, had a good night's sleep. Next day, I was absolutely fine. But again, just a warning sign that it happens. And that's not, I don't want your audience to take away from this that this is something I'll never get rid of. Not true. You can live a completely normal life, and hopefully I'm an example of that. But occasionally you'll get just a reminder, a tap on the shoulder that says, "Oi, be careful," because you need to be really mindful.
Yeah, and again, thank you for your honesty and transparency there. A couple of things, if I can, of note. That's life, isn't it? We can't always live in this bubble of living in a sanguine life where everything is just peace and bliss all the time. It's really, really unrealistic. When the pressure does build, it's a nice little reminder that your body's saying, hey, you know what, Chris, here's a permission slip. Go and take the night off, be nice to yourself a little bit, listen to your body. Other people may have got a headache. Other people may have got maybe a skin reaction or some IBS at that time of stress. You know, in your particular case, it just manifested itself in your pelvis, and it was a gentle reminder to say, look, you need to just pay attention, see the bigger picture, and look after yourself. So let's look at some of the other things that you're now doing as well. So the destination is something that we're really, really interested in. So tell us some of the activities that you're currently up to and how that's influencing your pelvic health.
Sure. Yeah, no, happy to. So I guess beyond nutrition, in terms of the activities that I really enjoy day to day, I'm a very keen walker. I try and make sure, from both a sustainability point of view, that I'm taking less travel on wheels and more travel on foot, which is great. So I walk a lot. At the moment, I'm averaging probably anywhere between 75 to 150k of riding a week, which is manageable. So that's three rides a week. I used to commute to work on a bike as well, but I do that less so now. So I'll do a couple of rides indoors during the week on a smart trainer, which is a great way to stay fit if you're a little bit time crunched. And I much prefer to be outside, but we don't always have the luxury of choice. And then I'll do a longer ride with friends at the weekends of various different sorts. So I would say that's probably the bulk of my activities. Pre-COVID, I was doing a lot of work in the pool as well. I enjoy swimming. And I was mixing that up with my cycling and my walking to give me another, if you like, a bit of a balance. It's a nice non-weight bearing exercise, and I find it quite rejuvenating actually to do. So I typically drop in a mile or a 1500 meter swim into my schedule. I'm hoping to get back to that once things have settled down in terms of access to swimming pools and all that good stuff. So by way of a destination, it was trying to get back to as much of a normal existence as possible, whether it be sporting endeavours, whether it be professional work, socializing, that sort of thing. I'm still attentive about the sorts of foods that I eat, but I wouldn't say I'm picky. I occasionally enjoy a drink, which is nice. What was there was one other thing that I was going to mention that I thought your audience might find helpful. We can come back to it because it's just slipped my mind. But I guess where this is building to, that was it. Yeah, of course, strengthening and stretching. So I've been really religious about strengthening and stretching. So one, strengthening because it ultimately, as we age, our bodies can't be relied on quite as much as they were in our youth. So I found that strength work has really helped me become stronger in all respects, and it's something I plan to continue doing as long as I'm able to, because I just think it's wholesome and it conditions the body. But equally stretching, so I'll do some yoga. I'll stretch 2 to 3 times a week. My body usually tells me when it needs to stretch, and I'll use a combination of a foam roller, a massage ball. I invested recently in one of those massage guns, which is great. No substitute for hands-on massage, but those can add up. So from a cost point of view, that's it's not something one can do every month, for example. And all of that helps. That's a sort of, I would say, a really helpful therapeutic wraparound. It's grounded in the exercises that we went through together and the exercises that I studied in the book, how to heal pelvic pain. And one of my messages to your audience would be, look, it won't work straight away. This isn't a silver bullet. It can take months, and I don't want that to sound pessimistic. You've got to think about this as a long-term journey, and it can take weeks, if not months, to readjust and get your body feeling more supple, feeling looser, feeling more relaxed. Depending on how your condition was provoked. Mine was just years of pushing myself too hard, and it's unrealistic to expect that to unwind in a few weeks, much as we would love it to. But it's something that will take persistence. But I can assure you, if you continue to persist, it will pay off. Through that strengthening and stretching, I found myself able to go further and to go harder, to go deeper, but to enjoy myself as well. I'm super attentive to my recovery time. So many of us wear smartwatches these days. If you're into athletics and training, they guide me as to how long I need to rest for, and I obey them, because I know if I don't, it's going to come back to bite me. So it's things like that that have helped me get to, I guess, the destination. And yeah, that destination isn't final. As I look forward to sort of the arc of life, you recognise that your health won't always be there for you. But I think the more dividends you can pay yourself now, hopefully, the more dividends you can reap in the future. So for me, the goal is to stay pain-free, healthy and fit, and able to enjoy all of the things that I enjoy today, without overburdening my body, and continuing to be mindful about the stresses and strains that I put on it, and that society as a whole put on it, and knowing when to write yourself that permission note and say, yep, I'm just going to hit the pause button.
Yeah, that's it. And it sounds like, thank you again, it sounds like you're really learning to listen to your body and then respond to it when it does start to say, hey Chris, what about this? Or maybe you should stretch a little bit, or maybe you should back off a little bit as well. And listen, it talks to us all the time, doesn't it? But we're really, really good at ignoring it and not paying it the attention that we should do. Just reflecting there, so you're doing between 300 and 400 Ks a month on average, depending on how many days and weekends, etc. Riding back on your pedal bike again, so you are there. And you also completed a 100-mile Centurion ride recently as well, didn't you?
Yeah, so that was a big milestone back in October, which I was really pleased to do. I think it's sort of a bit of a psychological milestone that says, actually, yeah, I can do this, and I can do so safely and without pain. Not something you can do on a whim. You've got to prepare for it. So I think a combination of those, of that sort of stretching and strengthening. For any of the cyclists out there watching, a bike fit is a first step to helping here. There's a brilliant company in California that's called Infinity. They do amazing seats for cyclists. I encourage you to check it out. Just Google Infinity bike seat, and you'll come across them. Very specialist, but very, very good. And I think one of the only reasons I'm able to ride a normal saddle now. So yeah, those things feel like big milestones. But again, you don't do them lightly. I made sure that my recovery afterwards was as it should be, and plenty of stretching and relaxation afterwards. But just on nutrition as well, I don't want people to take away that I live like a monk. I really love a cup of tea, and I know that tea is quite highly caffeinated. I used to drink quite a lot of decaf tea when I was being really, really strict about my diet. And actually, over the last year, I've reintroduced a cup of tea a day, which has been great. It's been lovely. It's one of those small pleasures that I really, really enjoy. And I'll typically have one early in the morning, and I might have one after lunch. But that's my maximum. I won't have any beyond 4 o'clock at night, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And my body's tolerating it. So you can get back to some of the things that you enjoy, but just be mindful that if you start to feel a flag or two popping up, rein it in and see how you get on.
Yeah, and really, really wise words there, giving yourself that permission to listen to your body and then make adaptations accordingly as well. Fantastic, Chris. Any final words, any final thoughts, having been through what you've been through and where you are now?
Well, I guess the first is, Carl, is gratitude, because were it not for you in the clinic, I wouldn't be where I am today. That's for sure. A huge amount of thanks to the team who've helped me get back on the bike. That's been quite painstaking, and they've been super. I guess a message to everyone who's watching. Look, I know sometimes the sources of the provocation are going to be different. But nevertheless, the journey that I've been on is, I'm sure, very similar to your own. You can get through this. You can beat it. It's not impossible. It may feel incredibly daunting. And like me, you've probably found yourself sucked into that vicious cycle of it'll never get better and I can't see the end of it, and I'm on all these meds and it doesn't make any sense. Carl has demonstrated with me, and I'm sure many others, that there is a destination, there is light at the end of the tunnel. I'm not a fan of medication. I really don't think it should be prescribed in most cases for something like this. I think the more you can play to a natural diet, gentle exercise, and being mindful of your body, and that goes for any muscle in the body. Overusing any muscle in the body, it's going to cause you angst. So I think for me, the message is, don't be disheartened. You can succeed. You can beat this. I hope I'm living proof, and I hope what I've been able to share today is useful to all of you.
Absolutely. It's been very